Director Reyes,
Here.
Director Hickok,
Here.
Director Weedman,
Here.
Director Wills,
Here.
Director Carpenter.
Here.
Acknowledge that we have a quorum. First order of business is receive visitors and read miscellaneous communication. Michelle, do we have any individuals that registered their intent to speak during the public comment portion of the agenda?
No one has registered their intent.
Do we have any changes we need to make to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move Carpenter. Second Wills.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes. It's unanimous. Is there a motion for the minutes?
Move to approve Hickok.
Second, Wilson.
All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? The motion passes. It's unanimous. Presentation of bills. Is there an amendment or a motion?
Maybe before we motion, just a couple of quick questions, Michelle. One is just maybe curiosity, how are we doing compared to other years relative to snow removal expense?
It is higher this year.
Are we? Well, that's.
I can check against the appropriation and let you know a number.
Yeah, and might just be interesting to understand what our overage is against our trend of a 5-year. The other thing is I noticed that we didn't have any Roshan bills for the 7-8 buildings submitted this month. I saw that we had bills in there for the 5-6 building.
I believe there is a Roshan bill. I'll locate it for you. I am not seeing it here. If it has been omitted, I will send that on to the board later, but there is a Roshan submission, and I did have it timely. I can tell you the amount. Pay app number 21 to Roshan was submitted for payment. It's $827,362.72. It should have appeared in the listing of bills. If it did not, I will submit it separately to the board following the board meeting.
Okay, thanks. I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. It's unanimous. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
Move to approve Weedman.
Second, Wilson.
All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. It's unanimous. That brings us to the public hearing on the bid documents and estimated cost of the furniture for the new 7-8 school building. This is the time and place for the public hearing on the bid documents and estimated cost for the furniture for the new 7-8 school building. Michelle, do we have any individuals that registered their intent to speak during the public hearing?
No one has requested to speak.
Are there any questions, comments, or objections from those present? Michelle, Board Secretary, have you had any objections filed in the Secretary's office?
No objections have been filed.
I declare the hearing on the bid documents and estimated cost for furniture for the new 7-8 school building to be closed. Are there questions on the written reports that we can answer?
I had one, and it was about fiber.
Okay.
And I think we're leasing, there's something about the way that we're routing maybe our internet service today to some buildings, and then leasing, fiber, I guess, maybe in a more similar way to what we were doing in other buildings. So I was just trying to get a clear sense of what buildings do we have an issue at, what buildings do we not have an issue at, if we had a rough order of magnitude in terms of what we think it's going to take to solve for that. So that was in the technology report, so we may need to get a follow-up on that unless maybe someone else has.
We could ask Mr. Grimes. My understanding is that we've got like radio point to point between some buildings. And so they were talking about replacing that because there continues to be, as we grow, more obstructions in the point to point radio. And then I think the other thing that they were doing was hooking up from Meadows to the 7-8 building, was one of the other elements. But I'm sure that Mr. Grimes could speak better to that when we have him available.
I would also, and I can send this in a separate email too, but in January, the transportation report talked about the bus inspection that happened, and we just didn't have an update in this month's report. I'd just like to hear how our buses fared through that inspection that happened in January.
Okay. Other questions?
I just had one. Jeff alluded to maybe looking at schedules. We hinted to it last time, kind of hinted to maybe here down the road we're going to hear his proposal. Is that coming up the next month or two?
I'm sorry, I missed part of that.
Jeff was in his report, he talked about getting creative with schedules, routes next year.
I think they're still making decisions about start times and schedules, and I have not heard a final decision on that yet.
Okay. I think our first report, we're still doing RSP Associates first. So we would have Rob Swartz join us, I believe, from via Zoom.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. I think Ann's working on getting you turned up.
And then it looks like I'm disabled from sharing my screen. If that can be started, I can run from my end. If not, I can have someone advance through on your end.
Ann is working on that as well. Give us 1 second.
All right, are you able to see my screen right now?
Is there any way we can turn the volume up on Rob?
All right, if it's good on your end, I will proceed. Hopefully I'm a little bit louder. I'll speak a little bit louder into my microphone too. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think you got a microphone on you now that is going to work a little bit better.
All right, outstanding. So appreciate this time this evening that I get to talk with you. I was initially thinking maybe I would be there in person, but for other reasons with COVID, like everyone, we're just kind of playing it safe. You guys have seen much of this information in past years. So I know Scott asked me to really hit this 100,000 foot view. And so I'll talk about different things that are in this presentation. I may not speak to all of the slides. I just want you to get the gist of some of the things that we see that are happening, some of the things that we see changing, and then what does it really mean for our projections. So won't spend any time with who we are. You guys know who we are. This is in reference for people to see this coming back to the presentation. But there are some things that I do want to comment to on how we're able to do the work that we're able to do for your district. This is a short list here on page 5, but if people did not give us information, give us an understanding of some of the timing specific to projects in within the city limits of Grimes, it would be challenging to give you some projections that you can rely on. So I really want to thank them for being able to do that. 100,000 foot view. So if we look at this slide 7, we're showing your enrollment's going to increase, and we're saying it'll increase over the next 5 years by about 600 students district-wide, so K-12 enrollments. Then you can see the breakdown for elementary, middle school, and high school. The majority is at the elementary level. That's related to the housing inventory that's being built, the households that are moving into your community, all are positioning you to have younger age kids. You've heard me talk about that in years past. Something that's really good with the planning that you've done and the work definitely that Scott's worked on with your capacity and how it relates to having the right capacity as the enrollment is increased. If you look at our capacity section, no elementaries will exceed the capacity for each of the elementary buildings, and none as well exceeds at the secondary for the middle school or high school. So all these different changes with the new 7-8 building coming online, all of these great things that have been planned for are positioning you where you're growing quickly, but you're not having capacity challenges. As we move into the development 100,000 foot view, there's a lot of really cool things happening. Obviously, what's potentially happening with the soccer complex, the 141 interchange being completed, the wastewater reclamation authority. That's a really big deal that's going to open up the ability to have more development in your area because of that agreement with the city of Des Moines. So those are some different things at the 100,000 foot perspective that's pretty cool in your district. Some visuals so you can get a sense of your district boundary, the city limits, your existing elementary attendance areas. We also, if you remember, with these planning areas that we're looking at what growth could happen down to these planning areas. We have about 200 of them. So if you think about that with any of the single family developments, the townhomes, apartments or whatnot, that's how we're tracking these things. If we look at the information, look at all these dots on this map. I love this visual in your district because it shows where current students are in the 2021 school year. The larger the dot, the greater the grade the student is in. So again, just seeing how some of this data plays. You guys are very much aware that this is a sophisticated forecast model. So everything is different in each of these 200 planning areas. So that's why we're monitoring back with enrollment, demographics, and developments. This page here just gives you a list of some of the other sources that we look at. Really valuable to have credibility in what we do. I am going to spend a little bit of time here on page 14. If we look at this information, what we're showing you is, I'm going to turn my pointer option on. So we have the actual physical year, and then we have the number of live births that happens. And as we continue, if we look at 2015 and we come back to 2020, 21, you can see the number of kindergartners that we get that are in Dallas County. And so we can see what that percentage is. So what we're trying to understand in this Dallas County and then Polk County is what your share is, so that as we look forward in time, if I come down the number of live births that we see, how if it increases or decreases going forward from 2015, what the potential number of kindergartners we could be working with in 5 years. We show this same data in Polk County. So you can see that, again, we're getting about 3% even here in Polk County with number of kindergartners 5 years later with the number of live births. One thing that we notice in Polk County is it's decreased in the number of live births since 2015 coming forward here to 2019. Enrollment by grade, you've seen this information probably from Michelle. And Michelle, thanks for that laugh earlier. That was funny. To the point. When we look at this enrollment, one of the things that we tell you about each year is we're looking at that senior class and how large it is compared to the next year's kindergarten class. So last year we had 213 seniors. This year we had 280 incoming kindergartners. So that helps us understand that you're naturally going to grow just by the number of seniors graduating versus the number of kindergartners coming into your district. That same data, but as a cohort, so as the students move through your system, one thing that's atypical, and I spoke some with Scott about this, that we tried to forecast back into this future model, is you can see these early grades where this year we lost 9 students in first grade, 3 going into second, 11 going into third. We've never seen these 4 grades all as a decrease until we go back to 05, 06 to 06, 07. And it was even worse back then. So the instructional modality, how the kids came to school and how you work through all of that, whether it was in person, hybrid, or virtual, this really could have been much different if the people had not accepted the choice that you were giving them for that learning experience. So moving forward, what we've done is we think some of these kids probably still are in your district. And so in our model, we've positioned that we think next year we'll get some of these kids back in your classrooms. So that you want to refer back to 17 to understand some of these things. If you remember, we look at in-migration and out-migration. You're pretty atypical to a lot of the districts we've been working with in Iowa in that you've maintained a similar number of new students comparative to the previous 2 school years. So you can see that bullet point of 218, 204, and then this year was 192.
On this slide and on the next slide, does this include open enrollment?
Yes, this would be anyone that's open enrolled into your district. So anyone that left your district since they weren't receiving a service, or if they were receiving a service and then left, then they would be part of this. But if they were not ever receiving a service from you and open enrolled to another district, then no, they're not in this data. But good question, good question. So again, I've zoomed out always as the board, you guys have always requested I show this at a district boundary level, but clearly the majority of these kids are over in the city of Grimes. When we look at the out-migration, again, similar number of students left the district as those that came into the district. Again, that's atypical. If I was to look at Waukee or Johnston or Ankeny, we see something a little bit different than this. So different trends that you have, again, just showing you what does this mean as we look moving forward in our projections. I'll show you the next video. This one shows you by planning areas. I'll show you this one here with the heat map. And I think this starts back in 06, 07. The red areas represent where we have the greatest density of students. And as it advances over time, you see that the majority are going to be in the city of Grimes. We still have some that's out in Dallas Center. You see a nice orangey color around that particular area. But the bulk of students are going to be in the city of Grimes. And this maintains what we've seen over the last 5 years. You can see as the new areas start to develop, we start to get more kids in those new emerging areas. Won't read all these bullet points. Again, just some general things with enrollment. Some of the larger grades are in the early elementary grades, and so that bodes well for more enrollment growth over time. If we get into development, I'll start at that simple view, and then we'll get into some of the cool things that are happening in your district. So the green line represents the census population estimates. So it's continued to be above 0 and moving closer to 500 new people moving into your community each year. The blue line represents the certificate of occupancies. So that's when we can actually move into those residences. And you can see that it's oscillated quite a bit over the last few years. We're still seeing building activity, but not like what we were seeing back in 2013, 2014, consistently year in and year out. We're anticipating that's going to change. particularly now that that flyover is done and we have some new developments that are coming online. That was some of our conversation with the city of Grimes, was the amount of building inventory that has been available. It's been slowly dwindling, and now we're having some new developments that are talking with them that's going to bring about more inventory to be built. The red line represents your enrollment change over time. And so you can see we've been positive. We've been increasing every year since 2006. And you can see some years it might be over 100 students. This year was 90 students. We also look at the type of development and what we're yielding. And so going back to single family or multifamily, we're just trying to identify what are we typically seeing in any of these type of developments that are tied back to our sophisticated forecast model. So if we look at this district K5, back in 2006, we were getting about 26 K5 students for every 100 single family units. You can see we've increased to be at 30 K5 students for every 100 units. And we've built single family inventory, almost 1,900 new homes in this time period. Multifamily, you can see quite a bit less than single family. And multifamily would be mobile homes, townhomes, duplexes, apartments. Back in 2006 at the district level, we had 10 for every 100 K5 students. And then you can see that it's slightly increased to 11 K5 students for every 100 units. And again, we brought on almost 1,000 multifamily units. So quite impressive to maintain and actually increase the yield rate out of this new inventory. Again, we look at home values. So this helps see how we tie this back to the county data sets. Year built, looking at where we're seeing that building activity. You can see some dots are sprinkled out. We have some out off of 169 and those 2 rural subdivisions out there, some that are in Dallas Center. But again, the bulk of them are going to be in the city of Grimes, and we're going to start seeing some movement towards the west by your 7-8 building. From our conversations with the cities and the county, what we've started to establish is a lot of really interesting information that's on this map. So you guys are familiar with seeing the green areas that we're seeing current activity or should see activity within the next year. Yellow areas are those that we would see closer to 5 years. And then the purple areas might be closer to 10 years. Again, we're just trying to look at the information, who owns the properties, where are we seeing infrastructure. So you can see the approximate route of this Des Moines DRA and Grimes sewer line as it comes here to the west. And we have some timing that the city's helped us understand how this gets built and what that may mean to open up some of these areas potentially moving forward. We are starting to see for the first time, we have a subdivision that's in the city of Grimes, just right outside where you see my pointer, that'll go to the Johnston School District. So that's kind of the first time that we're seeing something like that. It's not a large subdivision, but it is something different that we're anticipating. You may get a lot of open enrollment requests because those transportation, whether it's bus or by car, is going to come through your district to get over to the Johnston. So again, something interesting in your district that we haven't seen to this point. So again, this is just to give you a visual of what that is. We look at the existing land use, really focusing on the yellow areas. One thing that's new to your district is these tables. So I'll explain this from each of the elementary boundaries, and you can kind of see where we're seeing some of this growth as it relates to the type of development and the number of students. So table 1 is for single family developments, the number of single family students. And so that's going to be represented for students, the blue line, and the orange bar is going to represent the number of single family units in any given year. So you can see that we have more units since 2010 in the Dallas Center elementary attendance area. And you can see that enrollment with single family students, it's more, but it's kind of oscillated year to year, some years up, some years down compared to the previous year. Table 2 is that same information, but looking at how we would classify with multifamily development. and thus multifamily students. And you can see how we didn't have any inventory come online really from 2011 through 2015, but we had a lot of kiddos in those years. And then we had a lot more inventory that came in, but we have fewer kids in those developments. Table 3 is the aggregate of both table 1 and 2. So you can see that, again, we have more students than what we had previously here in 2010, now here in 2020. And then 2004 is where we get the percentage of students, whether they're in single family or multifamily. So clearly there's more inventory in the Dallas Center elementary boundary that's single family than multifamily. So we get more kiddos that are in single family developments. Again, you'll see that with each of the boundaries. And so you can see how that's changing over time with the different inventory.
Rob, can I ask you a question about that? So I struggled a little bit with the numbers, and maybe I don't quite understand what I'm seeing for like Northridge and maybe even South Prairie, where the number of students was up over 1,000. What does that mean? I mean, we can't fit 1,000 kids in Northridge.
Yeah,
So
and so
am I thinking about that incorrectly?
yeah, so we have, I'll go back and verify that they put the right access labels on here. But what this is suggesting is for total K-12 students. So I've been previously talking about K-5. I think this is all K-12 students. So if we broke this down by grade, there's not 1,000 K-5 students. There's 1,000 K-12 students that reside within this elementary boundary.
Okay.
So that probably is 99.9% of what
Then
you're.
that probably makes more sense to me, because I struggled with the same thing on like the South Prairie number, which was also larger than the building. So I get it if it's really K-12.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it has to be.
Okay.
Good question. And I'll follow up with Scott just to be sure on that when I look at the data. And I'll also update this table to make sure it says K-12, all of these tables. So again, this just gives you kind of the trend of what we're seeing. And this video, let me see if this one plays. So this is kind of interesting where we zoomed into really more toward Grimes. And you can see as new developments start to come online, the density of students starts to change over time. Really what we're trying to help you understand with this development is that once the developments are built, we're still going to see more students well beyond the time in which that last building permit's issued. Just kind of another visual to see how that changes. And you can see the changes by years, the dots start to pop on those parcels. We also have listed out, this is a little bit better than what we've done in the past for you, is each of the developments. And we've kind of listed off based on our conversations with the cities where we're seeing some of this information. So our planning area name that we gave it's what the growth area is as it relates to whether it's current 5-year or 10-year, and then the existing units in that development or within that planning area, what we potentially could see for new units. And again, the acreage for those particular planning areas, you see as that plays out over the current, the 5-year and the 10-year. So we definitely are going to have a lot more available lots start to come online. And that's kind of been one of the things that's been restrictive in some of your developments. And that's not been all that bad here the last couple of years from the standpoint of the district with your growth, not having as much building activity as we could have. Again, a lot of observations you can read back through here. We really thought the Wastewater Reclamation Authority is really a big deal, particularly with some of the estimated completion in 2022. That really starts to open up a lot of these areas on the west side of your district and your north side, really helps with a lot of that flow. There's different sidewalk improvement plans that will definitely help walkability through your community. So there's a lot of really neat things that we've been able to start to catch up on here in the last year and then moving forward for the next year. So what does that mean for enrollment projections? So I wanted to touch on that here as we go into 21-22. We have this plan that I mentioned that really is marvelous. It was hard to believe back in 16, 17, when Scott was rolling all of this out, that it actually would play out as well as it did. I know as myself, hopefully this makes Scott smile a little bit. I was doubting whether we would get here to 21, 22 and have all of the right space for everything, but it's played out really well. And you'll see that when we look at the projections. So again, kudos to Scott and you as the board that made this plan. I think it's really been beneficial for the timing and what your students get to experience. So what you're seeing on this particular graphic is moving forward in the projections. We've made all of the changes that are happening with buildings coming online and being changed over into other facilities, grade configuration. And so the past shows the red being elementary, the blue being the middle school, the green, the high school. As we move to the right, I've circled what's happening with the middle school and high school with these changes that are occurring. That we fully have this in your projections. So if we look at and focus on the projections itself, at elementary, we're about 1,300 elementary students next year, and we're going to grow to almost 1,600 by 25, 26. For the middle school grade configuration, you can see we're at a little over 1,000 for next year. We're going to be a little over 1,100 when we get out to 25, 26. And at the high school, about 950, and then we're going to grow to a little over almost 1,150. So a lot of growth is happening, and it's happening in a nice, consistent manner through each of the grades. So that's a positive thing to plan for some other things that we're going to have to look at beyond 25, 26. If we dive into these projections a little more, I think this is even more detailed than we showed you in past years. And so we have each of the grades listed out. In the past, it's the black font. And then moving forward, we show the blue font of what we're projecting for each grade. So this should help with some of the assignments by grade that you may potentially have to make at each of the buildings.
Hey, Rob. Ryan's
Yes.
got a question, I think maybe on the previous slide.
Yeah, Rob, could you go back to the past, current, future enrollment slide for me just a second?
Absolutely.
And I was looking at elementary enrollment, and I was trying to tie that to an earlier slide that you had shown, which did give me some concern, because I think we were showing that we were going to see like a 20% bump over 5 years in elementary enrollment, where it looks like this is more like 16%, which is maybe 2 or 3 points just more than what we were seeing in the middle school and high school. And so I think earlier we were seeing like 6% at the high school, 10% at kind of the middle school level, and then this kind of 20% bump at elementary in year 5 compared to today. So is it more in that 16% range, or are we really going to see 20?
Overall for the district increase, or as we are showing on this slide with the 20%?
Well, I think on this slide, I just ran the math quick compared to today. And if we look at elementary, and I assume that's being shown here in the pink. And I get that we moved, well, I guess we kind of moved the cheese a little here, right? Because we moved some of those elementary kids into the blue chunk. So was that earlier slide was that normalizing that same group? So was that K5 or K6 that was taking the assumed 20% increase from this year to 5 years from now?
Yeah, I think what we're showing, like if you took the 1595 that we show in 2021, that's K5. So if we pulled down to K4, what that number would be, and then what that growth is as we get to 1583, that's going to be the 20% growth.
Yeah. Okay, Rob. Thanks. That makes a lot of sense. We moved a whole grade of kids into that other chunk, and so it's probably knocking maybe the top off that curve a little bit in that elementary group, which makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. That's a great question, because it does tie back to, are the percentages, do they make sense as you start to plan for the future? If we look at this particular table again, you can see we're projecting that we're going to start having consistently 300 students in a grade, particularly K through 4, by 25, 26. So if we roll those forward beyond 25, 26, you're going to start to see in those middle school grades that we as well will start to see 300 students as we get out to 230, 231 school year of 2030, 31. We're going to start seeing some of those grades now move into the high school. I won't explain all of this on 41. I'll show it to you in the actual table and explain it. A little bit easier to do that. So again, we're highlighting with this red bar up here where we're having this grade configuration change and why that's a little bit different with the past school enrollment. But we show each of the buildings and we show the existing capacity and then what the capacity would be in 21, 22. And the real big change, as you guys are aware, is the Meadows becoming part of the high school campus and the opening of the new middle school. Those are some big drivers of what we're seeing with available capacity. We're showing Meadows with 0 on the projections because we've rolled those kids into what we see for the high school campus of being 9th through 12th. So they're all in the high school. And then of course the grade configuration as we move forward into the reside. So the past data, we show it 3 ways, and it's a little bit less meaningful at the elementary and well, really for all buildings because the grade configuration is changing, but just gives you a sense of the number of students that are residing in that attendance area as it currently stands, which is the green font middle row. The bottom row is the attend, so the number of kids that actually attended that building, regardless of where they resided in the district or out of the district. The res/attend top row for each building is a subset of that reside. So they actually resided and attended that building. So we get a sense of the school choice. We get a sense of things that may be related to programs, things that are related to in-district transfers that might be babysitting or different things. So there's a little bit of choice. And so we just are reflecting that that's what's happened over the last 5 years of data that we're showing for past enrollment. We're then showing you the enrollment by reside because the goal is that they go to that building. So you can see what those trends are for each of the buildings. And this is where we don't exceed any of the capacities for 21, 22 moving forward. We start to get close on some, particularly at the high school level, but not really a lot of challenges at any of these other buildings. Moving forward, I'll open up for some questions. Really the big thing that we're having to watch is what is the impact of COVID as it pertains to choices maybe some kindergartners this year chose not to make. And so will they come in as kindergarten? Will they be your okay kind of development kindergarten program? Will they come in as first graders? These are some unknowns. The good thing in your district is we didn't have a lot of students that would fit that category where we would know that they chose not to be in your district. Again, going back to page 7, that's where you see that, I think it's page 7 where you see that cohort change. That's kind of the big deal of trying to understand what that potential regreening or resurgence of those early grades might be. But do you guys have any questions about where this is headed with the data? Does this make sense?
Hey, Rob, it's Brian again. Yeah, I think it makes sense. I guess the question is, did we project out to where we do think we start to run into capacity issues, particularly in the elementaries? I know is it 7 years from now, 10 years from now, 8?
I think let me go back a couple of slides and we'll kind of play this out. So we have a little bit of space district-wide. So let me switch between two. So right now we have 2,275 capacity elementary-wide in your district. What that's going to start suggesting is with K4, and we have 300 students in 5 grades, that's 1,500. we're gonna have to have closer to 370 students in each grade to be at the point where we're at district-wide capacity. Now, we may have some challenges in individual buildings based on the attendance area, sometime between 26, 27, and 30, 31. But overall, for the district, we should have available elementary capacity going out well beyond this 5 years. I would say maybe 2028, 29 might be where we should be seeing some elementary capacity issues. But I'm also going to give a caveat. The way in which we use spaces may change. So I'm sure you guys experience different things in having in-person learning with kids and what you have to do with COVID. Do we maybe need to use space differently, where we need more space to be able to have better safe environments for future pandemic type options that may happen? So there may be some things that adjust what your overall capacity is. But if we keep the capacity as you currently have it defined, I would say, to give you a date, 28, 29 is probably a safe bet when you start to have elementary decisions that need to be made. If we go back and look at your middle school, where we have 1,500, again, we're probably in that similar time frame, because again, that's where we have 4 grades, and if we have 300 students in the grade, that's 1,200. So I'd say that's probably a trigger point when we start to have consistently more than 300 kids. We're going to have some challenges in the middle school grades. When we look at high school, you can see that we have a 1,200 capacity, and when we get to 25, 26, we're at 1,147. If I go back to this data, with the 262 going out, 261 coming in, we naturally see a bump. Probably 2027, 2028 is probably where we're right at that 1,200. But again, a caveat, and this is where Scott can speak to this, there's so many different things in ways that students may experience their educational programming. So there may be some fluctuation in that capacity, knowing that some of those students may not be in your building for a portion of that day for other programming opportunities. So there are some things that you're going to have to consider. But if we just look at hard numbers of capacity, number of kids, and when you start to be in a position that we have capacity, I think I said 20, 27, 28 for elementary, probably similar for the middle school, probably a year earlier for the high school.
Okay. And then, Michelle, did that kind of tie to what we were thinking in terms of when we need to?
How many years before the next elementary?
Yeah, bond.
Yeah,
Is it in that window that we were already thinking?
we said
Okay,
10 at least.
okay. 10 from when we pulled the last one, or 10 from now?
It looks like there's plenty of room to shift boundaries, just with 3 grind schools at giving capacity compared to where we're projected in 5 years. There's still plenty of room if you move the boundaries, per se. I think it looks like there's plenty of room.
This is
Well,
Sarah.
5 years.
I had a question too. Early on you talked about live birth rate really starting to maybe trend differently in Polk County. Curious if you could talk a little bit about how that's weighted in your calculations, because that's on my mind as well. If we're seeing changes there, that has implications, of course, if we hit that 370 mark that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And let me go to that slide. I'll start with Polk County because it's the bulk of where you see development. So with live births, we're seeing that the trend through 2019 is fewer live births in Polk County. But what we're starting to see that offsets why you should start to get a different share of that is the amount of building activity. And so that's why that agreement with Des Moines with the sewer is really instrumental in future development. So we should see more people that are building in your district. And so even with there being 500 fewer live births in Polk County, by having more building activity, you're going to get a greater share of future households that will have kindergartners. So that's what offsets that a little bit. The other thing is we look at the live birth data. I think the 2020 becomes official here in the next month or so. And so as we look at that information, does it continue to stay at 6,500 or does it come back? Some people have made some assumptions that with COVID, we're going to see more live births. I haven't seen anything from the hospitals that indicates, hey, we're having a record breaking end of last year or start of this year. So I'm not seeing anything anecdotally that's going to say we're going to spike over a 7,000 live births in Polk County. So again, we want to look at that data. We've calibrated it to understand the universe that we potentially could live in for future kindergartners. And that's why we show you this table. One thing that we've been kind of playing with is showing you like 2016. Well, we don't know 21, 22, what this would look like in the universe of kindergartners, but we do show you based on our modeling. So you can see here in number of kindergartners that we've ranged from about 200 to 240 with about a 3% share. And then if you, as I make your eyes go batty, but as I come back to the projections, you can see that we're showing your kindergarten enrollments. Again, it's more than just Polk County, but you can see we have you going up where you're going to be over 300s, closing in on over 330 students by 25, 26. That's related to new developments. So if we don't see a lot of new developments or it slows, then the ability to hit that 331 kindergarten in 25, 26 will be challenging. Long answer, but hopefully that helps you understand how I've tried to integrate with some real data and then with what we're seeing with what's happening in your community specific to some of these planning areas.
Thanks for that. I did have a follow-up question, and maybe more or less to make sure I understand some of the building that's happening in the community. So, okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard you say that we were projected to have an increase over multifamily homes versus single-family homes. And with that known, we also could draw the conclusion that multifamily homes or multifamily residents had less children than single-family homes. Is that correct?
Yeah, so a couple of things good questions that you have built into that question that I'll answer. So if we go to, just give me a second, development. So if we go to this two tables with single family and multifamily, we've broken this out with your existing elementary boundaries. And so one of the things that you're seeing is it's different in each of these attendance boundaries. For instance, if I look at Northridge, look, we're at, in 2020, we get 41 K-5 students for every 100 units. And if you look at, if we go up to Dallas Center, the more rural area, we only get 18. So each of the planning areas have some sort of different yield rate of kids. And so we have a couple things that are happening here. We know there's potential to have more multifamily developments. I think like those townhomes up there on the east side that they're kind of wrapping around that athletic field that's going to be built. I guess I shouldn't say soccer because it's going to be able to do many other things the way it's proposed. But as we see, there's a greater potential market for some of the multifamily products, but we're still going to see a very strong single family product that's built in your area. But just don't be surprised that some of the developments might have, let's say, 4 to 10 acres where they might be apartments or townhomes. And what we're starting to see is a slight increase in the number of students that we get out of multifamily. Not nearly as the difference that we have in single family. So we're just watching that. Each district, it's a little bit different. The type of product that's being built may make it more attractive for a family that would have school-age children. So we're looking at things, are there more 2 and 3 bedroom units in those multifamily homes? Again, ranging from duplexes to apartments. Are there amenities like a park or a pool that may make it more attractive for those households, but really more the number of bedrooms kind of drives that. And we're seeing a change in the Des Moines market where some of the product that's being built, and this is probably coincides with affordability. So the less affordable product becomes to buy single family, people may still want to move into different places within your community, but for it to be affordable, they may have to choose a multifamily type product. So those are the things that we're trying to weigh out: price, so what could be for a lease, what could be for rent, and the amenities that may be in any of these particular developments. Yeah, I apologize if that was long-winded, but you had a great question set up that really gets into the complexity of how things are very different in each of the planning areas.
I had a question, probably more for Michelle. In 5 years, with us being within 53 students of the current max capacity of the high school in Meadows, I know we can build some extensions off the high school wings, correct?
We can.
Do you know how much what that capacity would be, what our max capacity would be?
I think each wing is 8 classrooms, and that's been about 2.5 to 3 million for 8 classrooms. I can't tell you which wing it would come off of, or if it's multiple ones, I don't know that.
Are there other questions for Rob? If not, thanks, Rob. Really appreciate the overview of the material.
Yeah, thank you guys as well.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
That takes us back to building level reports. And Lori, it's Meadows.
Lori Phillips, 89 principal at Meadows, and next year, super lucky because I get to go to the 7-8 building as principal. And so, what I wanted to talk to you about tonight was when we went to Meadows, I really familiar with the challenge of taking 2 groups of teachers and putting them together, 2 groups of teachers that have had common traditions, common ways of doing things, and then putting them together. And knowing the importance of really building that climate, culture, and foundation right from the beginning, build it early, so that when we do face obstacles or challenges, that we have that base and know how to work together. So I have brought, we put a team together 2 years ago to start this process, and some were from leaders from the middle school, some were leaders from Meadows. And so I brought some representatives with me tonight to talk about the process that we've been in the last 2 years, and then where we feel we're going forward as we're getting ready to move into the 7-8 building.
Lori, can you turn on your microphone?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes. So that's it from me.
It's an easy part. There were less charts, so we appreciate it.
I'm Shelly Brown. I teach 8th and 9th grade language arts at Meadows. And let's see, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and you come up here. But this is the whole team that Lori said, like she was trying to bring leaders from both of those schools together. And where this all started was in November of 2019. We were so grateful to be able to go to AMLE, which is the National Middle School Conference, which stands for Association of Middle Level Education. And that was in Nashville. And it is like, it's the National Middle School Conference. And so it's all of the top people who know everything about everything when it comes to middle school. And it was a long weekend conference, and of course there was like more to pick from than we could attend. And so this is a picture of all of us, and so we divided and conquered the whole time, picking like the best speakers to go to. And these people know everything about middle school engagement, content area stuff, counseling stuff, movement and scheduling, and just everything that we could ever want to know about middle school. And so we would all race to our favorite speakers, and then we would get back together and just like, we were like this the whole time in this picture, of just super excited to talk about our ideas, and plan for, you know, taking it back to our current classrooms and then planning for, the future 7-8 building. So we have a lot of, I mean, we were collaborating on Google Docs all the time and just lists and ideas and tons of stuff. And so this is just some of the keywords of things that we would talk about. We talked about advisory all the time and just what's best for kids. And so I'll turn it over to Caitlin and she'll talk about the process more.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Salenta. I teach 7th grade now at the middle school. So to pick up where Sally left off, we started talking about what would be the best way to bring our two teams together most effectively, and we came up with the Enneagram. And so we came up with the Enneagram. So are any of you familiar with the Enneagram or Gallup Strength Finder, DISC, any of those? And so these are all personal growth frameworks that you can use. And the Enneagram, so the Enneagram has 9 interconnected types. And although they're numbered 1 through 9, it's cyclical, so there's nothing that's, you know, better or worse than any given number. And so the goal of the Enneagram, rather than to put you in a box and say, you know, you are this number, this is how you function, is to help you relate to others, relate to the other types. So both you as yourself, how do you relate to the other numbers, and also how do you relate to others who are of that type. And so we really truly do need every one of them, both in our group, to function at the highest level. So our goal is to, you know, move toward the center to what we call a higher level of integration. And so one of the really beautiful things about the work that we've been doing as a team here is that we've learned a lot about each other's worldviews and our motivations, and how, so when conflict arises, how we can best make sure that we have an appreciation for the other people on our team, and how they may be, you know, stuck on a particular topic, and we realize how that's really going to help us make a solution for our group. And we'll give an example of that in a little bit related to furniture. New building furniture fair is on your agenda today.
I'm Emily Jed, I'm the counselor at Meadows. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we got to do actually in the process. So we each actually took the Enneagram assessment, and then we got to meet one-on-one with Linda, who was kind of leading us through the whole process. And so that's when we got to dive deeper into what number category we kind of fell into, but then also learned about our strengths and weaknesses and points of stretch and points of release. And there was all this lingo to learn. And then once you kind of got into it, you really started to see how you thrived in it. And that was really eye-opening for me. And then when we all came together, we got to meet a few times to really dive into what we all then brought together. And one of the biggest things for me was just hearing people talk about stuff that I never think about, because I know what number I was, and I knew that I looked at the world that way, and I looked at school and students that way, but to hear it from totally unique perspectives for me just reminded me we all needed to be there. One of the things that was most eye-opening was when we would talk about Mark and Lori, and I don't know if you've ever seen Mark and Lori work at Meadows, but they're different numbers. One's a visionary and one's the loyal skeptic, and to see that work together, we got to listen to a podcast about that, and somebody was saying how having those two people lead, one of them is just they bring this vision and this excitement, and then one is saying, let's do it, and let's ask all the right questions to make sure we do it well. And then together, you just watch it thrive. And I get to see that day to day when I'm at Meadows, but to have it talked about in a different way was really eye-opening to me, and really got me excited about going to the 7-8 space and say, okay, well, who else do we have? And who else is coming, and what's their number? And some people got to go and talk with Linda on a podcast about their experience, and that was fun to even be able to bring in what we're learning to communities and other people, and to encourage them to dive into it. So we wanted to dive in a little bit with you about how we would take what we learned about ourselves in a situation about maybe choosing furniture for a 7-8 middle school building. So we'll go through kind of based on number.
All right, so I'm a 1, and 1s can be very, very traditional. Be really nervous to take risks, very nervous to be here tonight. And so And one of the things that are really the question that guides us is always doing the right thing. And we want to make sure that we do something, we want to make sure we do the right thing, we want it to be good. And it's really easy for us as ones to get really caught up in things like budget. Is the furniture going to arrive on time? What is the quality? And what has been our experience in the past? And so those are some questions that definitely we're going to be thinking about as a one. But really at the heart of a one as a teacher is what's best for kids. And so what would be good for our students? And we know that while budget and things arriving on time and things like that are very, very important, that maybe sometimes those aren't the things that are always at our number one for kids. And so it's been really nice to have my colleagues with me so that they can kind of help see, the bigger picture of what we can do. That would be best for our furniture.
I have two, which is the considerate helper. And so I don't think about any of the money stuff. I think about, okay, well, what if the kid had a really rough morning and they have to go to this classroom and they are totally set that Mrs. Brown is going to have the desks this way, but then the desks are a different way. Okay, but what about this kind of furniture and this chair, and making sure the spaces are all welcoming and inviting for all types of kids and students. And I don't think about anything except just making sure that it's going to help and support each kid and each staff member in the way that they need it for their room and environment.
Okay, I am a 7, and that's the enthusiastic visionary. And so when we had all the samples laid out of all the furniture, I was just like, oh my gosh, I love these colors and this would match so well. And oh my gosh, remember that couch that we saw at the AEA that one time? That would be so fun. Or like, what about the kids? The kids would love this. We should have this in our classroom too. And then I know I need my colleagues to say, well, okay, like Caitlin was saying, we need every single person because it's like really fun to have ideas. But then we need every other piece of it. And then it all meshes perfectly.
Hi, I'm Jim Shutt. I'm the instructional coach at Meadows, and I'm a number 9. And number 9 is the peacemaker, and I'm a really great listener. So I sit back and I listen to all of them talk and decide what's going on. And it's not that I don't have an opinion or I don't have like an answer or anything. I just don't like to have a confrontation with people if I don't have to. Now, if I need to, I'll do that. I'll put my hand out there and just go out into the swamp and decide what to do. But most of the time I would sit back and I would listen to them and figure out what's going on with them, ask questions to make sure that everything that they're thinking about is clarified and that they're going on the right track. Their direction is correct. And then I would move everybody forward and say like, okay, well, how do we get to that point? Like, how are we gonna get out of the furniture? Or what colors, like I need these colors and I need these colors and I need these colors, and it's like, okay, so what colors are we gonna decide on? Yeah, we only get one color, or maybe 3, or maybe you get 3, I don't know. But anyway, so how do we move forward? Which is what I'll do right now. So when we get all this stuff, how do we go? Where do we go from there? What do we do? So as we were doing some coaching as our team, we realized that we had strengths and that we had challenges. And so our strengths were that we are risk-taking and we had lots of ideas. Okay, we want to take a risk. We are not afraid to jump on the limb. But underneath the challenge is, and we have too many ideas, and we need to make sure that we pick the best ideas or the ones that we will be able to follow through. Next one is problem solvers. We found out that like, you give us a problem and we're gonna decide it, and we're always looking at putting kids first. The challenge maybe with that is that sometimes we felt like maybe we would go and overpromise things. And that's still that pulling back, like maybe too many ideas and like, okay, let's not overpromise, let's figure out like where are our boundaries and how far can we go or what can we actually do. And then the last one, strengths are definitely we're collaborative and we're very inclusive. The team, figured out how, I think we grew so much as a team, and the collaborative skills that we have were really great. And I think the procrastination comes from 9s, which was me. There are 2 members of our team that were 9s, and 9s do procrastinate. But that doesn't mean that we don't get things done, okay? I mean, we are sitting back and we're waiting and listening to what people say, or we're, gaining all the knowledge, and then we'll make a decision. So that's what strengths and challenges. And then this was, I think this is really kind of cool because this shows our whole team that took that test. And it shows that 7 is the strong or the most. So our team is definitely a 7, enthusiastic and networked. So throughout our team, we all have those qualities, because remember, you're given a number, so you're put in a place and given a number, but you have a quality, you have all of the numbers as part of your whole assessment. And so this is what it showed. We were enthusiastic, we have relational support, which were our 2s, and then adaptive mediation, which were the 9s that we have on our team. This allowed us to say, like, okay, why is number 4 so small? Like creativity or originality. Because when we get together in a group and start spewing ideas, all that Wordle thing that we have, like the kids and advisory and all of those things, we thought that it was probably pretty creative, and that we were generating a lot of exciting ideas, okay? But that just wasn't anybody's strong part. So we're trying to maybe utilize some of our creativeness that we have on our team, and use that since it's not part of this whole score that we have. So that kind of wraps everything up, and we just wondered if you had any questions for us.
What color did you decide on?
All the colors. And patterns. It's more about the patterns, I feel like.
I think the colors were kind of decided, the 3 colors of the pods were decided. We got some input on furniture in the media center, and in the complementary colors or complementary furniture that we had, so that was kind of nice.
So how many people were involved in the Enneagram assessment? How many people got assessed?
So right now there are 8 of us. In this group, there are 8 of us. Yes.
Is that something you're looking at doing broader? I mean, you talked a little bit, Lori, about bringing the culture together.
Yeah, just this last PD time, we had everybody take the free assessment. The free assessment doesn't give us nearly the information. It doesn't talk about the stretches and the strengths and everything. We took the paid assessment, and so that would be something I'd talk to Scott about.
2-part question for you. How have the events of the past year impacted your group and its function in those 9s becoming 7s or those 7s becoming 5s? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe a little part of that question. I think one of the great things about doing this over the course of the last year, because we started this Enneagram process in August, is kind of getting at that SEL, the social emotional learning of just ourselves and working together. That's been super helpful. Yeah, I think we've definitely seen some movement in our numbers and how things work for me as a 1. I can go to I can go to a 4 would be kind of where I would go when I'm under some stress, like listening to music and not necessarily, maybe we talked about the levels of integration. So trying to just make sure that we get the high level of the 4, because every level, at your high level of your 4, you'd be, very creative and coming up with ideas. On a low level of 4, you might be crying. But, trying to stay away from that part of it. And
you definitely have your sweet spot, a number that you would be going to, and a number that you maybe want to try to stay away from. And so me with a 9, if you can see there's a triangle there, and so I don't really want to go to a 6. My sweet spot is going to a 3. So when I figure out what everybody wants, it's I make a list and I make a checkoff thing, and I decide what the plan is. And so it's the competitive achiever that it's okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And then I'm in a really good place because I've completed those things that are on the number 3 side. And you can see where all the lines go. There is a stress place that you don't want to stay, and then there's a strength side that you That makes you feel a lot better, right?
Yeah.
You're going to your.
You can get like your line of release, you might think.
I don't think we moved lines as much as understood each other's, that individual
Okay.
coaching, we had several of those via Zoom with Linda, and then we also had a lot of group coaching. Okay, here's who we are individually, and then here's who we are as a group. And so I always have a lot of ideas, and I say, let's do it. And Mark is always saying, well, what about? And it would just drive me crazy, like, don't think of every bad thing. But now I get it because he's thought of it, so when we do implement it, that's all been taken care of. You know, I mean, he has been helping me a ton, you know. So that's just one example of how 6 and 7 work together.
So the second follow-up to that then is where you are now your new normal? Is that your new home, or do you expect this group to shift and evolve?
We know we need more 4.
Yeah, it's
And we all talk about, do we find a 4 on the staff? We all kind of try to judge who our 4s are. Or as Jim always tells us, do we find the 4 within us? Do we need to find our own creativity? So it just gives us a lot of conversations about where to go as a team, and then how to bring other people on as a team and understand each other as we work within PLCs, bigger and then bigger as a staff, and the bigger is bringing those 2 groups of teachers together.
It's fascinating. Well done.
Thanks for sharing. This was a lot of fun to hear about y'all. Can you share a little bit about, you talked about the conference that you went to and all the great ideas. I'm just curious, what are things that you think you're gonna bring back and introduce into the 7A building?
How much time do you have?
Let's maybe do like top 3. And maybe perhaps things, that would impact, that we would hear in the community. Like if we're out, a ball game and somebody brings up something, what would be some things you can expect for us to notice?
Talk about the parent, that maybe helps this with you too.
Okay, so, one thing that we talked a lot about was, like parent and student orientation. We just had so many ideas about this, of just more communication and to our parents and kids of what it will be like, and showing them middle school, because we are so middle school. I mean, that's what the middle school conference is all about too. Like you see all these leaders who are just so middle school, and it's different. It's different than every other level. And so we just want our parents and our kids to just get a feel for what that's like, and especially parents when they're sending their kids, because it's not high school and it's not preparation for high school. It is totally middle school and it's different. And then the other thing that I was thinking of is what we hope to do in the middle school is with our 2 grade levels, we hope to have houses, which are like, I think that they will be kind of like half of 7th grade and half of 8th grade would be in like one house together. And so those kids, maybe, half of the 8th grade advisories and half of the 7th grade advisories would be in a house. And so those kids could kind of get to know each other a little bit. Since we kind of have this unique 2-grade school where we're always welcoming or sending off half of our grade or half of our school every year, that would be kind of like a cool way to keep our kids connected. I don't know, is there a better way to
Well,
explain
they really
that?
focus on the smaller learning communities. As they continue to get bigger, how do we keep those small? So we have 15 kids in an advisory. Okay, so that's a small group. But then we have these 5 advisories, 7th grade, and these 5 advisories, 8th grade. 8th is gonna be the top 4. And so they become a house. Let's say they're called the Voyagers. So then these 7th grade and these 8th grade do things together. There's a lot of mentorships. But then these 7th graders mixed up, they become in the same house. It would bring in new 50%. So the whole thing is trying to build those relationships, small by 15 advisory, bigger by a house, bigger by a grade, and then bigger as a school, so that we can really focus one-on-one and bring everybody together as a community.
I think one thing we have excited is like our biggest mindset is like everybody belongs there, and like we're thinking about our numbers and thinking about who we are as a teaching staff and support staff. It's like, okay, all that could go away if we just knew that every kid knew that the moment they walked into that building, they had a spot, they had an advisor, they had a home. Like that is the thing I think that drives every conversation we have. And so I just get so excited to think about, if we get to do a parent-student orientation, like, yep, we want you. We want everything about you. We want all the stuff because there's nobody else but you that's supposed to be here. And I think the advisory and the houses and the furniture, like all of it plays into the fact that that is exactly the culture we are so pumped to start. and we talked a lot about like the "You Belong Here" message, and how do we find something for every kid? So we have, especially at the middle school level, so we have athletics, we have music, but how do we get some more clubs and things for kids that maybe that isn't their interest there, and that whether it's a service club or whether it's chess club or whatever it might be, so that they feel like this is that I belong here. This is where I'm a part of this. I contribute here.
I think other than that, there have been a lot of teacher collaboration that they're thinking about, like how can they utilize the building, like what can happen. I mean, we're going to have 2 learning centers that are outside, so we have 2 courtyards that are going to be really awesome to be able to use those. Have a commons area that that it's going to open up to, so they can extend their classrooms and be able to utilize more space for them. They could bring 2 classrooms out together into the commons and do cross-curricular activities. There are just some really, really exciting things that teachers are already starting to think about that we would be able to do. And so it's just exciting to be able to think about the future and what we can do with space that they're
I've just got maybe a quick question, Lori, about how you kind of use that information. Is it kind of the way you build a team, and so you've got kind of representation from a cross section of those numbers, or is it more about the team's the team, but they kind of then know who their peer group is and what kind of makes them work?
Yeah,
And then like also maybe we're gonna make Jim talk first because he likes to hang back.
it is all of that. It
Okay.
was really nice to bring middle school and Meadows together and have a common topic to talk about. So that just got the conversation flowing and finding out what our motivations are. But then also understanding, okay, the other day, when we came back full time, somebody said, I just can't do desks. I just can't. I know I had desks before, I have to have tables. And I'm thinking, my cluster's a 9. He's a peacemaker, he has tables. So he was the first one I went to. I said, would you be open to taking desks instead? I have a teacher that really does it. He goes, oh, of course, for sure, So I mean, really just kind of knowing, just because, he said, it doesn't matter either way to me. And I think he would have told me if it did, but just kind of understanding each other and knowing each other's motivations, I think has brought us closer together.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a question to which there may not be an answer yet? But I'm curious when you think families might get some of this information, like when you're gonna kind of communicate more about what it might be like for 7 and 8 families.
Yeah, we've been talking about, as soon as we get a name for the building, which I hope is real soon, starting a Facebook page and getting those pictures out on there, and then start talking about things that we know for sure we're going to implement. So that's just as a start. We do have a couple parents of 8th and 9th graders who are amazing bloggers and are kind of known around even the whole state. And so maybe even bringing them on board and asking them if they would want to write some things about what we're doing at the middle level. We have a long way to go, but we feel really proud of the model that we've built with middle school, and then just how to continue to meet that developmental need of kids, and then being able to share that around the state with others. So yeah, we get that name, we'll just get stuff.
Good luck. I kind of have 2 thoughts that just brought up. One is also, I'm guessing there's some planning going around about our 8th graders who will also be making a big change for next year, because their vision has been to be in Meadows, and they will now become part of whatever our high school looks like. So I think that'll be something that I'm hoping is also being planned for. But also I'm super excited about the idea of that 7-8 building having clubs and belonging, and really getting every kid involved in something so that they have that sense of belonging. And then how we shift that both directions, really. How can we start it in a different way at the 5-6 building? So it starts there, and then it grows, and then it even grows into the high school. So that if they start chess club, I don't know, or, whatever, bocce club or whatever it is at the 7-8 building, how does that then grow into something that they can do at the high school level? And so I hope that some of those conversations will go both directions once you have your feet under you and feel like those are real successful at the 7-8 building. How can we grow that so that our kids 5-12 have that vision of belonging in each building that they're in.
We have a great situation right now because our 8, 9 will be going together. And so having the high school come talk to them frequently has been nice. And then the entire group at the middle school will be the kids there, and so then us talking to the entire group. A lot of times Kate will say, well, we can, survey all of them because that group is our kids that we're going to have. So we have them all in one place as we prepare for that transition. We do know that is an area where we can grow because we have so many buildings. We can never do enough of transition and getting them and really their parents. At the 7, 8, the kids aren't as scared as their parents are. And so getting their parents in there, we know it's a big deal.
Is there anything that you need from us or administration to help with the move or anything from that perspective?
It's been really fun sharing with you kind of our vision and where we want to be, understanding, nobody belongs here more than you. It's like the message we want, that you belong here. When you walk to a restaurant, you've never been there, you get that weird feeling. We don't want anybody to have that weird feeling. We might just like, oh, I'm supposed to be here and I'm important. So you just supporting that is important to us.
A really cool name.
And you have supported us by sending us to the conference and
Yeah.
supporting our PD and giving us this amazing furniture and an amazing building to do this stuff.
I don't think you know how excited the staff is about the building. I mean, if you could just like sit in on their meetings or, just hearing them dream up what they can do, you just gotta come see it when they're rocking, because it's gonna be so fun.
Well, thank you for your time this evening, getting us all excited about the new Saturday building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jill.
Thanks for letting me follow the excitement.
Better be just as enthusiastic.
So, I do, I'm gonna tell you some exciting things that have been happening last Friday, all day long. We had professional development on a full day professional development, and in the morning, we had some groups that took some time to take care of business. We had some elementary groups that were working on social studies, unit development, pacing, inclusion of our focus, but it seems that month of February kind of helped lead to that, but that inclusion of diversity in teaching across the content, K-12 and social studies, not just for a month. We had our interventionists that needed to have a little more time with Panorama Student Success. That is a program and a database that helps us track our student success with literacy and reading. It will be more robust in having math information inside of that, as well as student behavior. It will help us identify what we're calling the early warning systems, but early warning signs for our students. We had special ed staff working on identifying those needed accommodations for ISACs, that is around the corner, and any student who needs an accommodation, we need to make sure that those are in place within the system. And our special ed teachers have worked very hard to make sure that we have accommodations for students who need them, so they can be successful in that assessment as well. CTE took some time together as well. We've worked with science. High school, they are, as you remember, approving the shift in some of their courses so that they more closely align to the science standards. So students who come to us through 9th grade through 12th, they spent some time making sure that they were embarking on units of instruction for those courses as well. We had AEA staff, district administration, building principals, TLC leaders helping with plan for and deliver the PD on Friday. The afternoon was strictly for buildings. So identifying their building needs and having time in the afternoon to work on that in case they were in the building. Some were in and out for some important things that were going on elsewhere, but that's what the afternoon looked like for us for professional development last Friday. SIAC, some of you had the opportunity to attend SIAC, those of you who are on the committee. We did have that meeting Monday, February 8th in the evening. Our agenda, we talked about reviewing the purpose of that committee, what that looked like. Donna and Chef Joe shared information about Taher. Because we held that meeting virtually, unlike last year, we were not able to sample and have the quality assurance of Taher nutritional services. Hopefully, that will change in the future. We talked about the ISAS update, just letting them know what our testing dates would be, and that because we are testing, and this is a change, we used to get to choose whether it was a fall, mid-year, or spring. Everyone is testing towards the end of the year, and most likely those scores will not be showing up until after we're out of school for ISAS. Mr. Grimes did the district update, talking about enrollment, facilities, what those, that will look like, progress on those. It wasn't quite like Rob's was tonight, but he did give that information on enrollment facilities. Talked a little bit too about our 512 vision and our fortunate partnerships with business and industry in our community partners that we have there.
Jill, this is Sarah. Quick question for you about the ISAS. Yeah, so knowing that we're not gonna get scores back until post, whatever, summer. Can you talk about how that might have impact for planning, or if we notice any changes there?
We would anticipate that when that data comes, we will use it. So if we're able to get that and staff has that early in the fall, when our kids come back, when they come back with our kids, they can use that to make any kind of additional, I'll say, movement in supports if they're needing a tier 2, tier 3 intervention that they see based on that data. The other piece that we have to keep in mind is this is going to be, for most of our students, a one shot. I mean, this will now be a brand new assessment. It was administered in the 18-19 school year, online for secondary, paper for elementary. We had no ISAS last year. So again, this, even though some of our students experienced it 2 years ago, it will feel brand new to them again. So for us, it will be 1 point on the data collection of making decisions for students. So we won't feel as though we're missing out by not having this piece this spring. We will have gathered great data formatively and summatively during the school year. And this will be for Iowa and for us, unless the state changes that administration time, we will be looking at later data for ISAS than we've experienced in the past. So we may need to be doing a little bit of postponing. So having tentative grouping, tentative pieces, and then adding ISAS if we need. And as we continue to take the ISAS, that will become, I'll say, more second nature, as well as when that ISAS changes to adaptive, which it is not yet. When that moves to adaptive testing, that really will be much more validated for us, for our kids.
So do you have any idea when we might administer 21-22 ISAS?
For next school year? Right now, the state always tells you it has to be within the last, from March until the end of May. So for us, I do not anticipate that we would administer in March. Spring break tends to take a lot of time away from making sure we can get that assessment completed with all makeups that are needed. So for us, probably the earliest we will ever test is April. And I say, you never say never, you never say always, but having a week long and conferences in March would tend to interrupt our testing schedule. Which, yes, leads to that ISAS piece. We did have an overview for our school coordinators. They took a training on February 10, a little short training that they needed to do on March 3 in the afternoon. Anyone who might be administering a test will have test administration training that ISAS and Pearson require. They will have test security training. Most have already taken that. It's through AEA PD online, and they will need to sign security agreements before they are asked or allowed to help administer the ISAS as we're moving through in April. Our window that we have for all on-site is April 1st through April 30th. The state has said from May all the way through May 28th, you may still test. We have online students we'll need to start, we will make arrangements for. We would like them to come on site to do that testing. It doesn't mean in a building, it could be in this building. It doesn't necessarily mean that they would be moving into a school building. But we can have through the end of May to test our online students. And there is a remote test option that doesn't have great information about it yet, but it will come out to districts because we do know that there will be, the state knows that there will be times in which there will be a need to have a remote administration of access. And when we know more, we'll tell you more, but right now we don't know much about that.
Can you tell me, Jill, how are we doing fast testing for those remote learners? Are we having them come in? Are they doing that remotely?
FAST has the ability to, and now I'm saying this and then looking around at the people. FAST, I'm gonna stumble on this. They're administering it remotely because that does have the ability to be administered remotely.
So we have something in place where we're already doing some assessments remotely.
I'm waiting for somebody to say that's wrong. I do know that we have, we also have spent a lot of time with our students who are online with other people, our own teachers, our online teachers, as well as curriculum facilitators and some of our teacher leaders administering that as well. But yes, that has that piece. ISASP is the only, we are one of, I think, 2 states, if I remember right, that have thought that ISASP remotely would be a good idea.
I'm even curious if we've thought about kind of outside the box things like, so we would have some of our remote learners come in person on maybe a day when there aren't a lot of other people in the building, and then have a sanitized space where they could then sit with lots of distancing and get that test in kind of a way that might have more integrity than some of the online ways to make sure that those scores are educationally relevant. Where sometimes that it'll just be different if it's done remotely than if it's in school with in the same manner that our other students are taking that assessment.
And we do know, we have the luxury and privilege this year to have some spaces that we've been able to use for other things with students, for materials pickup, for hearing screenings for our online learners. So the same thing here. We may have some opportunity to have a location where people can come that doesn't have the traffic of school building. We will be doing the electronic online ISASP for all of our students 3rd to 11th grade this year, which was our intent last year, but didn't end up having that. Any more questions, other questions about ISASP? Other than what's there. We'll have more information in March because we will, like I said, right around the corner from that March board meeting, we will have testing begin. This one isn't all that exciting, but it is required. So we have winter reporting as well. That happens. We'll have fall, winter, and spring reporting. The winter SRI, we have that submitted, as well as the CTE application is pretty arduous as well, to make sure that we have all of our courses in, things that we are offering, how they're offered, what strands they live in with our CTE. So in conjunction with our student reporting, our CTE, that is quite cumbersome in the middle of the year. High school gets the brunt of that information. A lot of conversation about our concurrent enrollment and our supplementary weighting courses. Those concurrent courses that begin after fall. Many people from every building spend time correcting those errors that we see in advance. Deanna and Deanna work very hard to get those errors limited when they're sending them out to the building, so that they don't have so many people involved in making sure that we have the data we need and that it's correct, so that we can get that submitted on time in the winter.
you handling any of Scott's updates?
We're gonna tag team.
Okay,
Reviewing building permit numbers, I know that there's 22 new permits for a total of 125. That's 158% of previous year. So the growth is still there. Reviewing COVID-19 information, we did hold our vaccination clinic last Friday in coordination with Unity Point. And there were 161 employees vaccinated that day. Our second vaccination clinic for the second shot will be March 12th.
Maybe Michelle, quick question on that.
Yeah.
Was that the total number of vaccines that we had available, or was that was that the total number of staff that volunteered to have the vaccine on that particular day?
That was the total number of staff that volunteered to accept the vaccine at our clinic. There were several staff members who went elsewhere.
And then do you get a sense of what % of the staff is vaccinated or has received the first dose, or is that, I mean, outside of the clinic that we run ourselves, do we not have that information available to us?
We do not have that information.
Thanks.
I can maybe address that.
Yeah.
So we did a 2 surveys. The initial one, you know, if it was offered, would you be interested? And the response to that were that 350 members of our staff were interested in that. And then when we did okay, we're gonna get doses, if you tell us, will you get it? That came back at 250. But then between the time that we did that and the doses were available, and we were very upfront with staff about, we don't know how many doses we're gonna be able to get. So, you know, if you have the opportunity to get it, do so. So I think, you know, the interest level is there at that 350 number. And, you know, as time went on and vaccines became available, staff members did.
Some of them may have gone and gotten an appointment ahead of the 19th.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense.
Other COVID-19 information, there were 6 students and 2 staff members who tested positive last week. 74 students and 5 staff members were in quarantine. The student absentee rate was 4.44% and staff absentee rate was 5.07%, not necessarily completely tied to COVID-19. I want to remind board members that we will hold a special board meeting on March 1st, which is next Monday, to review the proposed certified budget. It says in the packet that it's for bonds, but it's for the budget presentation that evening. There is a special meeting that will be held with regard to bonds, and that's May 1st. Okay, so that information. There will also be the negotiations committee is meeting next week as well. So for those that are on that committee, you received that confirmation today from Mr. Grimes. Michelle, did we get a confirmation of the time of the budget meeting on March 1st? I think it's 5 o'clock. 5? Okay, thank you.
Did you say we're having a meeting May 1st, a Saturday?
March.
No, you said the.
Yeah, I did.
Bonds was May 1st.
The bond special meeting, I'll double check that date. It might be May 3rd. Diversity and inclusion.
So last month, Mr. Grimes talked about the diversity, kind of talking about our committee. As we worked as an admin team and conversations that have been happening in the district in the last year, more than that, but really heavy in the last year, our administrators have had conversations as an admin team. We've had conversations at the district level with district admin as well. And so as we talked about what that looks like, we talked about knowing that it's important. We know that we want to have a committee that has representation with staff
with parents, students, as well as administrators in that group and board members. And as we talked about what that might look like, Mary Jane Stites and Lisa Claiborne have willingly and very excited about co-facilitating this work. Both have experience and passion for this work. Not only just that kind of moves around their responsibilities here in the district, but responsibilities and involvement they've had in past districts as well. And so as we talked about the importance of that, we also talked about really needing to build capacity first, in-house with the admin team, with our cabinet, moving it then with our cabinet, moving that to other workers. So we talked about needing to have a common knowledge and understanding with our cabinet as to why and how and where we want to go. We need to make sure we're integrating that within the district so that we can take that out to our broader community, our community, school community, as well as truly our DCG community. We need to recognize and discuss the things that are happening that we see happening that are non-equitable practices with our own district and our own individual awareness of those changes that we need to make ourselves as well as those practices in the district. We want to take a look at and have an awareness of our own data. So having the work done at the district level with that cabinet before moving out to the other members of our school community and DCG community will be important. Just an example, we'll talk about the types of data that we disaggregate. In the past, often our data came for our standardized tests disaggregated by gender, socioeconomic status, as far as ethnicity, race. But often we don't always look at the other pieces of data within our own system where we disaggregate down to those areas. We're talking about academic data, our discipline data, programming, athletics, activities, technology access, just to name a few. So we want to start with that mindset of looking through all the parts of our own data, looking at that educational model with the equity lens and finding our opportunities to identify our gaps and set that mindset. We want to build that awareness with cabinet. We want the cabinet to come together so that we have that ability to build that capacity within the cabinet, taking that to our own staff, our directors, and the staff that they work with, as well as principals into the building level. We've talked about, Mary Jane and Lisa talking about framing this out with that consistency in learning when we're talking about our educational model and the 3 C's. We want to have that consistency in learning. We want to talk about collaborating with each other around the data and problem solving and moving to actually increasing and having the opportunity to make changes. Consistency in the learning and communicating about our current realities and problem solving what that might look like if there are some inequities in our system. Being consistent in our focus in learning. We want to be result oriented here when we're looking at that data. And then again, that collaboration so we can look at maybe what changes we do need to make within the district. So the intent is to start out in-house, and that begins tomorrow with our cabinet meeting. And then we will continue to have at minimum monthly learning together as cabinet members, talking about what that looks like within our own departments and buildings, intending that we will have that work that we will continue this summer and hope to tentatively have a fall start with our true committee, maybe in September, early October, with that full committee work. So it's kind of the information we have for you. It's a little bit different than what we thought about last month, but we really feel this is the better way to go to build that capacity within our own people prior to moving that out to a large committee and in that community.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that it's important when we
have these conversations, that it is not expert driven, that we all as a part of the community have a responsibility to grow in these areas. And I think when you talk about really looking at a culture within an organization, it makes good sense for people who are local to understand their role and responsibility in it. So I think it's smart, and I think that you'll find, hopefully long-term, that there is more buy-in, there's more trust on something that might feel a little bit difficult and challenging. So I welcome and I look forward to seeing what the cabinet comes up with and really does have some more concrete goals and some idea of how it might really see the changes in the district. So thanks for the update, appreciate it.
I agree. I think that, I feel like though we need to, like, I think we have that piece that's real important. We need to look at all the things you talked about. I also feel like there's a lot that we are doing that maybe people don't know that we're doing, and we do get questions from the community about that. So I think somehow we also have to, at the same time, be really proactive about, there are things that we are doing with our students, for our students, about diversity and inclusion and equity. And, you know, there have been, over the last 2 years, lots of things that have come up in the community on social media about DCG by DCG students. You know, this is not, it's not about if we're not inclusive enough and diverse and addressing diversity enough, it's how we're not enough. And so I think it's really important that we be as proactive as we can, as soon as we can, about just acknowledging that this is part of our system and every school system in the state, and how we're trying to do better. As we know better, we'll do better. And it's important that we just continue to be real upfront and honest about that. So, you know, what are we doing as things like Black History Month come up, or Hispanic Heritage Month, or those types of things? And I think we're doing things across classrooms, across buildings. I just am not sure that we are being proactive enough about letting the community know that we are, that at least some of these things are on our radar. Probably not everything that we need to have on our radar, but we're making those small steps. So I just think it's important that somehow we let the community know that we are working on this on different levels. I think the leadership, I mean, that's like one level, but I also think there's kind of that ground movement that needs to happen.
Thank you, that's a very good point, and I have written that down too, because you're right, we are doing some really neat things. And I had the opportunity, as I think some of you had too, had the opportunity to respond to some questions about, hey, what does February look like? What are some things that are happening with our students in recognizing that Black History Month is here in February, but what happens? And so having that conversation with one or two people is nice, but truly, how are we communicating and sharing that with our larger community, the things that are happening in all areas that we're moving? Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you for the update. I'd like to maybe make it a standing agenda. I assume you will, but maybe just formally have it as a standing item every month for like several months.
Yes.
Keep us abreast of what's happening.
Yes, and I'd like to make a request, maybe this is just for my benefit since I'm still kind of a junior member on this board, but these committees are great that we have them, but I think it's a little bit confusing to me about what the charge of some of these committees are, what the output of some of these committees should be year in and year out. I think we've got board representation on a lot of these committees, but very little. I mean, we agree to be part of these committees at the beginning of the year. And some of them, certainly there's work around policy and finance and some of those things that are pretty active, and then others probably to a lesser degree. So it'd be interesting to me to understand from a D&I perspective, what's the board's role in that? Because I think we should have a role. And then, you know, what's the greater kind of construction of that committee, which I think is probably part of that why piece that there's going to be some recommendations coming out. So my assumption is going to be a lot more, but I feel like there's a tightening up of the work and the structure and the you know, kind of the work that these committees put out every year, and then how it's reported out, what their goals are, those types of things. So I think across all the committees, there's probably some work to do there, at least with some of them anyway.
Thank you, Ryan. I have that down too, of what that might look like. And even larger scale than just this learning that we're doing with our own staff and then moving that out to the larger community with the committee. That might be something just each fall when we talk about that approval of the committee, whether it be SIAC, whether it be the nutrition, health required, what those committees are. With that, we can maybe have that communication about what that committee role is and what the responsibility of that committee might be. And sometimes it's okay, there's a required committee and there are some things that, here are the things that they get to do. And I will agree, some of those committees have more work behind them, more involvement than others in a district, so.
Well, I think this one's a bit interesting in that, you know, I think from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, there's certain representation of diverse and inclusive groups that we need to be aware of and be working toward and those types of things. Then if you look at some other things like we just looked at tonight, you know, there's not a lot of ethnic diversity, for example, in Dallas Center Grimes. I think what we saw tonight was like 96.1% white in our district. And so what are we doing to help educate folks to say, hey, the whole world's not this way, and prepare our young folks for what the world really looks like ethnically, and making sure that there's pieces and work being done around what's not represented in our district as well. So this one's interesting, and I think a little bit going to take some time, which I'm glad that you are taking some time to kind of develop that that work and who's represented on that.
Any other information you're asking that I will write down and take back as well?
Do you foresee some student input on some level? I mean, I think about
Yes.
when some things have hit social media about concerns from the student level, I think that's the most impactful. If we have students from one community or another saying, this is a hard place to be part of this community because people aren't accepting or because these things happen. That's really big when students will say that, even if they do it anonymously. I just don't know how we gather that input, but I think it's really important because I might have one experience with my two children having gone through the system that could be very different from another family's experience because their children are different than mine or mine are different than theirs. And I think it's important for us not to assume that that my experience is the same as everyone or my students' experience is the same as everyone within our community. And I know that our administrators and teachers have their thumb on the pulse of that as much as they can. But hearing directly from the students can be super helpful. And even honestly, them having the chance to express that and feel like that's heard becomes healing in and of itself. Hey, someone asked. And so I hope that the committee sooner than later can look at getting that student input.
Yes, and our intent is to have students, hopefully, there would be students who would like to be a part of that committee and this work in the district as well. That's our intent. We hope that we'll have some people interested in that at the student level.
And this might be cart before the horse here a little bit too, but I guess for me personally, I'm very excited about the idea of this being a district-wide committee. This isn't one staff member's responsibility. We do not have a diversity and equity officer, or that person is the only one who's charged with this. I think it seems like the obvious place, and I just really am excited to think about this being something bigger than one person's job. This is how you experience culture and you address these things like Ryan was talking about, that this becomes everybody's responsibility and we talk about it and we're held accountable to it. So I think it's pretty good. Thank you.
And I hope, you know, that we learn from other districts, leverage what everybody's learning to bring back to help shape what we do. I think we can learn a lot from the districts around us.
Yes, because we are not the only ones. There are some with the officer and some that don't have that position and working through this as well. And I know that is part of we have reached out and have had open conversations with some of the districts as well to help us kind of identify, okay, if you've done this, where do we not want to start? What are some, hey, we really had this really good idea. Okay, great. And then we've learned that 3 of the 5 districts who have embarked on this said, we did too, so, you know, with caution, move ahead this way. So that has been helpful too. Thank you all for your support in this endeavor as we move forward with this as well. Thank you very much.
Before I move on and talk about enrollment projection, which I think has been done thoroughly tonight, I want to correct the date for the special meeting for bond sale. It's March 10th, not March 1st. I missed a digit. So March 10th, please put that in your calendars. As far as the enrollment projection on page 117 of your packet, you'll notice that it's not much different than what you saw in January, but please note that online registration begins March 1st, and we expect much more new data to come in following that. Staffing?
Really, staffing hasn't changed much since the last month as far as information around staffing. We are embarking on interviewing. Secondary has advertised, and there are some positions that have already been started with interviews, and you have approved some people on the consent agenda with that. So we will continue holding those interviews. I've had the opportunity to be involved in some. I've really enjoyed that, being part of the district and getting to see that. As far as moving forward with the secondary transition between the 7-8 and the 9-12, we're still looking at identifying those needs, and there may still need to be a few adds as we move forward with solidifying enrollment and needs for kids in that transition.
Facility updates, boardroom video streaming upgrade is planned for March. We've been waiting on a part in order to get that finished. So hopefully we'll get that done in the month of March. The 7-8 building progresses. As we discussed before, construction is moving north to south to keep all trades rotating within the facility, which has been nice. We are working on ordering items for specific areas. Obviously, the furniture, we took bids, and you will approve that tonight or put that up for consideration. We're also working on office, copier, etc., items for the health office, smalls for the kitchen, equipment for activities and for PE, and technology for that building as well. For the 5-6 renovation, we are projecting to move staff into the new pods over break so that work can continue to transition there. And we're working on ordering technology to upgrade each classroom so that they have consistent presentation devices throughout that facility. And finally, the beginning of discussions for renovations and work at the high school. Scott is currently working with the architect on what our initial needs will be and uses and discussion of that. So that process is just beginning. Also, Roshan's name change is the reason we can't find Roshan in the list of bills. It's Graphite Construction.
That's right. Well, they changed.
They did. They did.
So are they in there?
They are.
That feels good, Michelle, doesn't it? It was there.
Don't like to be caught off guard. I'm sorry.
I wouldn't be very happy if you're like, they're right here.
Also, while I had a little bit of time, I looked at snow removal. We are at 104% of appropriation for snow removal for the year through the last billings, but I can't guarantee that that had that last little bit of snow on it, and it wasn't a little bit of snow. So definitely over in that area, but not terribly so. Over by $2,600 about. We've expended $61,337 on snow removal this year.
That's good. That's a lot lower than I thought it was gonna be.
Future meeting presentations, just to call your attention to that. Still there. Next month, we'll have Heritage and Northridge for our building presentations. And then you can see as we go through April through June.
Was there, I didn't see it on the agenda, was there gonna be some conversation about, kind of the block scheduling and, kind of some continue, is that next meeting, or is there an update you can provide on kind of where we're at with what's going into that decision?
I do not want to say that it will be next month's meeting, since I don't work with President Rance on that agenda, so I would hate to do that. But no, we have had that conversation about gathering feedback on what the block would look like. I think Kathy asked maybe last month that conversation about what that would look like. And we have had conversations, Mr. Grimes, Mr. Bloom, myself, about what that might look like, and gathering that data to see what a schedule for 21-22 could be moving forward with our 9-12 staff and kids.
Yes. This is Sarah. Sorry, will we survey students about their experiences with block schedule?
I would anticipate that we would do that.
Okay.
And so that's where I was going, and I think, here's the thing that I'm concerned about, and I grew up in a block, and so maybe I've got a fondness for it that others don't, but I think I don't know that the experience that the kids had this year is a typical block experience. It was colored in every way by, hybrid and masks and COVID protocol and a funky lunch and all that other stuff. And so, to the extent, the other thing I just wanted to maybe talk about a little bit is just the fact that, it's not like, COVID's gonna be gone in the fall. I think, if this trend continues, it's certainly gonna be much better than it was a fall ago. But nevertheless, if the block is the right structure, I think we just have to be a little bit careful about how we collect feedback. And if that feedback isn't overly glowing, do we want to bring kids back into an 8-period day and have all those other interactions that are happening? And so that was just what I was hoping to have, is some conversation about that idea, how we were gonna engage students and parents, which I think is a very good idea, and we should. But I also think that in some way it's gotta be referenced that maybe the experience they had this year wasn't a typical block schedule experience either, for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and to your point, our examples and experiences our students K-8 have had, or 9 have had this year either. So no, and that's something that I can speak with Mr. Barnes about this week, and he may want to send you out a note to give you some more specific information about that. Thank you, Ryan.
And I think my experience with block is fairly limited, but I would like to see us have a block. If you're just sending information out, I'd like to see a block situation that does allow students to continue to be in more than one elective. So I would hate students to have to choose band over choir, or choir over band, or over art. I know there is some of that truth that has to happen already, even with an 8-hour block, 8-hour day. And it becomes even more problematic if you don't have some skinny blocks or some things like that make it so that kids can still have those opportunities. I always hate the idea of kids having to make a choice when they're 14 years old about something that they may never do again if they don't have that opportunity.
So let's table that discussion.
Yes,
And let's
exactly.
put that on, actually put it on the agenda.
Thank you.
Michelle?
Just quickly on the monthly budget comparison. Quickly on the monthly budget comparison, we're at 52% of expenditures for the year and 50% of revenue for the year. March is our big property tax month, so we expect revenue to increase significantly there. And then looking at that public budget comparison, when I come to meet with you March 1st, I will be recommending an amendment to the budget, specifically in that support services area. That's where you're gonna find the bulk of PPE for COVID-19, all of the cleaning for COVID-19. Those are the major reasons why that is so far out of whack for this year. Because of course, when we prepared a budget last year, at this time, we didn't know what was coming. So that's all I have for you.
Right, are there any board member reports? If not, we'll move to old business. The first item on old business is the second reading of the board policies. You've got a hard copy of 501.1 at your placemat. And what is listed in the board book did not get updated, so you've got the version here. The part that we had talked about last month was the part like right in the middle that says the principal will investigate and sort of steps through what we had talked about as being the appropriate escalation from the principal to the superintendent to the county attorney. So when we approve it, it would be this version 501.1. So with that, are there any questions about the second reading of the board policies 102 through 705? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve Wilson.
Second, Carpenter.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes, it's unanimous. So the first item under new business is resolution directing the advertisement for sale of not to exceed $1,135,000 of general obligation school bond series 2021A, approving the electronic bidding procedures and approving official statement. Is there anything you want to say to that, Michelle? I think we're going to have a series of these that are
So,
similar.
Series A is the new money, it's what's left of the $46 million bond. Series B is the refinancing of the 2012 bond. Series C is the tax exempt bank qualified of the 2015, which is the heritage bond, and it's the portion of it that we can offer tax exempt. And then taxable refinance is the balance of Series D. And those last two are both heritage elementary.
So this was the presentation Tim provided last month. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve, Wills.
Second, Pajarno.
And then this is a roll call, is that correct, Michelle?
They're all roll calls, so you have to bear with me. Director Wilson?
Yes. I always have to go first.
Sorry.
I approve this.
Thank you. Director Pajarno?
Yes.
Director Rance?
Yes.
Director Picard?
Yes.
Director Weedman?
Yes.
Director Wills?
Yes.
Director Carpenter?
Yes.
So the next resolution is a resolution fixing the date of sale not to exceed $4,110,000 in general obligation school refunding bond series 2021B, approving the electronic bidding procedures and approving the official statement. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve, Hickok.
Second, Wilson.
This is also a roll call.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Director Pajarno?
Yes.
Director Rance?
Yes.
Director Hickok?
Yes.
Director Weedman?
Yes.
Director Wills?
Yes.
Director Carpenter?
Yes.
Motion passes, it's unanimous. Resolution fixing the date of sale of not to exceed $8,620,000 general obligation school refunding bonds, series 2021C, approving the electronic bidding procedures and approving official statement. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve, Pajarno.
Second, Wills.
Roll call?
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Director Pajarno?
Yes.
Director Rance?
Yes.
Director Hickok?
Yes.
Director Weedman?
Yes.
Director Wills?
Yes.
Director Carpenter?
Yes.
Motion passes, it's unanimous. Resolution fixing the date of sale of not to exceed $1,600,000 in general obligation school refunding bonds, series 2021D, approving the electronic bidding procedures and approving the official statement. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve, Hickok.
Second, Weedman.
Roll call?
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Director Pajarno?
Yes.
Director Rance?
Yes.
Director Hickok?
Yes.
Director Weedman?
Yes.
Director Wills?
Yes.
Director Carpenter?
Yes.
Motion passes, it's unanimous. So next up is the motion to accept and consider bids for the 7-8 building furniture procurement. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, we had several bidders. We had 4 bids for package A, which is the majority of furniture for the building, and 1 bidder
for package B, which was the music room. The low bid of those was Premier Furniture and Equipment, accepting into record all of the bids submitted in this motion.
Did those bids come in where we expected them to? I mean, were there surprises?
They were under budget.
Move to approve, Wilson.
Second, Paterno.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes, it's unanimous. Approve the recommended vendors for the 7-8 building furniture procurement. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Hickok.
Second, Wilson.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes, it's unanimous. Approve the contract change order number 2 for the administration center. Are there questions on that one? I thought the change order listed out, itemized the items that were included. If not, is there a motion?
Move to approve, Hickok.
Second, Carpenter.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes, it's unanimous. Which brings us to the first reading of board policies. And there are 2 sections here, the November primer and the December primer. I just wanted to point out a couple of changes to these as well that you have in front of you. I'll just tell you what the difference is between what you have here in hard copy and what you would have read in the board book. So with 404.0, if you look at the last sentence in the policy, you'll see paid is lined out, which matches, if you look up above in that second paragraph, the board will offer the following paid. Paid is also lined out there. So it's making that to read more consistent about this is representative of the leave and not to infer that it's paid leave. And then, well, let me point out one other that you don't have a hard copy for, which is 502.11R, which is the corporal punishment. It's listed in there, but what wasn't indicated is that 502.11R is to be rescinded. So it's as if that one would have been all lined out. And the rationale for rescinding that is that the regs, the DE has provided new administrative rules, and we don't have additional regulations. We don't have like an example from the IASB yet. And then the last change, you've got a physical copy of it, and it's 503.6. And at the bottom of this, there had been a line that said this policy is optional. And so that line has been struck. Our intent of passing the policy is that it's not optional. So just a couple of last minute items. Are there questions on that? Either on just on the policies in general or those updates?
Doug, this is Sarah. I did have a question regarding the corporal punishment policy that you mentioned. When you said that IASB doesn't have one or is working on a new one, do you anticipate us seeing a new policy that we will add back, or is this permanent?
So it's just the 502.11R, so the reg piece that's being changed. My guess is that there will, I mean, I don't know for sure, but my guess is that there would be something that would replace it.
Okay.
And I don't know if you know better, Joe, or not.
Right now, that's section 103. Section 103 law is it was coming into play this winter. And so IASB and others are working to make sure that language and rule and policy are aligning. So I don't know, those of you, it's happening. While they're flying the plane, they're building that. And so the things that we have now, we have, and if there are other things that come from that legislation, we will make sure that we have in place as it's required.
So as a reminder, we have the latitude to go back and edit or amend the policy at any time, not just on our schedule that we have been following. Thank you.
And 50211 was updated in this policy block, and it includes a lot of language that references the new 103, I don't know what to call it, administrative guidelines but it's the 50211R, so the regulation piece, the rules piece, the more detailed piece that we don't have. If there are no other questions, is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve Wilson.
Second?
Second, Paterno.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Financial statements? Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second, Weedman.
All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. It's unanimous. Board commendations. Is there a motion to approve?
Move Carpenter.
Second, Wilson.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Written and oral communication. So I just want to make sure I have this correct for upcoming board meetings. So next Monday is March 1st, right? Wow. So next Monday, March 1st, do you know what time we're meeting? 5 o'clock? Okay. So that is a board work session. So 3-1, 5 o'clock is a work session only. And then we've got, you said March 10th?
May 10th is a special board meeting for the sale of bonds.
I thought you said March.
March 1st is our work session for certified budget.
Okay.
March 2nd is the negotiations
Yep.
committee meeting. And May 10th is a special board meeting for the sale of bonds, and a time has not yet been set for that.
Okay, that was the question I was going to ask, is if we knew the time. Okay. So then the next regular board meeting would be March 29th. So we'll avoid any spring break sort of issues.
Is that May 10th at 5?
No time yet.
Okay. Got it.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Paterno.
Second, Carpenter.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes, meeting's adjourned.